Can you walk us through an example of how you and your team have developed a synthetic customer and executed it in practice?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I've been doing this a way, and what I will say is that the process has developed from originally just taking a fairly detailed persona document and then adding that into, creating a custom GPT. So that was back when, a couple of years ago when custom GPTs first were sort of were made possible. Now you can take. I've taken 30 odd voice of customer interviews, quantitative interviews, qualitative interviews over a time period, added on deep research into the questions that might be being asked, what people are saying about about the category itself that the company's operating in. So, being able to see what questions do these people ask about this topic, and what brands come up in that, and really being able to pull together an insane amount of data that I would never be able to personally interrogate and hold together to be able to come up with an idea. But I can then build all of that and turn that into, using these reasoning models, and a large number of tokens I'll add to be able to then create archetypes, but essentially sort of the different persona amongst those, and really being able to look at, okay, so these are then how we group those together. These are the personas that we have. How does that then, and then being able to turn those into essentially the context that we would use. Now you can either use those in a custom GPT or a Copilot agent. You can create those as a skill in Claude or as the context within a project. But you can also go and take that further, and I've been doing work where you turn that into a retrieval augmented generative AI system that you host somewhere in the cloud, and via an MCP server, anybody anywhere can, if they've got the credentials, and obviously security is important here, they can connect to that MCP server and access their persona from remotely, and that's quite a nice way if you want to make sure that you've got control over versioning and things like that. So there's a whole range of ways that you can make them, but at the end of the day, it's basically creating a knowledge base that the AI is then using as a form of saying, this is who I want you to operate as.
Yeah. What is your go-to AI tech stack for this?
So I would say at the moment it's Claude. I've been using Claude for quite a while now, but I'm also using the likes of OpenAI. Um, uh, you find that the different models keep moving and changing, but it's really the connectors, the
Yeah.
harnesses, if you will, that are making the big difference at the moment. And so being able to use large amounts of data on your, from your, files that are on your computer, and being able to analyze those has been really, really powerful recently.
So, just a minute ago, we talked about the fact that you're very, very clear that this is not a replacement for research. How should marketers think about the balance needed there?
So I like to think about, research budgets have always been tricky. People either have a lot of budget for research, or they don't have very much at all. So I always think you should learn as much about your customer as you possibly can. There's quite a lot you can do without actually having to go and physically talk to your customer, because you can now do a lot of social listening online anyway, and so you can get a pretty good approximation there.
Right.
But anything that you've got, the more in-depth voice of customer, the interviews, if you can go and do ethnography and really understand it, that's really where you get that last 15% of the real special sauce, where you really get the spicy insight that
Okay.
nobody else is going to capture. So if you're looking at something that's just going to be, is this going to work in my category? Using deep research and sort of finding out what you can find out online is enough.
Mm.
But bear in mind that pretty much any of your competitors can do that anyway.
Yeah.
If you're then going to go off and get capture voice of customer, this is where it becomes your unique insights that you can then really layer in and really use and take advantage of.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any situations where you feel a synthetic customer should not be used?
Yeah, so there's bits of information and research out there that sort of show that you really shouldn't use it too much for sort of pricing. And there's been experiments where
We
uh,
all want it for nothing.
exactly. But there was an example where I think Claude, or they created an agent called Claudius to look at to manage a food kiosk, and it failed miserably. It managed the kiosk, but it made a staggering loss.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful around relying on these to make too many deep, fundamental decisions about things like pricing. But being able to, it also looks at what information have you captured. So if you've already done a pricing analysis and you've been out to customers and you've got lots of information, then AI can do a great job of synthesizing that and creating a model that will be able to answer those questions. But if you haven't captured that data, if you haven't asked those questions, then it's going to be inferring the answers. And that's where you get into trouble,
Right.
because AI is really, really good at giving wrong answers very, very confidently. And so we have to be careful that we understand what's gone into these synthetic customers, so that we know what boundaries we really should be, feeling confident or not confident about trusting what they say. And I would always argue that no matter where you get to, it's always good to then have a check with real customers at the end of it. But hopefully, whatever comes out when you go to real customers is much, much closer than you would have been without.
What is the biggest hurdle that you see marketers across the world experiencing when it comes to letting in-house salespeople and product people know about the synthetic customer and the intel that was gained? Is there bias? Is there, we're not going to use it? What do you hear?
But I think there's a bigger problem in terms of an AI problem, in an AI adoption problem, rather than a shall we say a bias against a synthetic customer or not. In terms of, because I've certainly been doing a lot of work, with marketing teams. We're expanding that sort of laterally into product teams and into sales teams as well. So we've been expanding that. And I think that the trick with product is that you've really got to get really good insights. So it's a way of activating their insights to help them as part of the innovation process. And then, of course, those insights really carry powerfully into marketing. Of course, if a product's taken a couple of years to develop, you need to make sure that you're getting a checkpoint to see, well, how much has things changed since we developed the product before we go to marketing. And then I think with sales, the biggest challenge is that, do they really see their specific customer in that? So, the reactions are, well, is this just a US based persona, or is it, more local? And so again, it's looking at, to be fair, a European buyer may be quite different to a US buyer. They're going to have certain things that correlate, but there's going to be certain other needs that are going to be very different, because, the commercial landscape is different. So we have to be careful to look at where do these actually work? Where is the data consistent? And where do we need to then pivot to make sure that they're up to date?
Let's talk outcomes for a minute here. How quickly do you see teams really benefiting from synthetic customers?
Well, it's almost straight away. It's pretty much the same as once you start using a persona. So once you've created those persona, teams start using them straight away. Here, I think the difference is that you can start using them for far more tasks along that journey.